Yes, welcome back. This is F a Rap Critic. I'm your boy Malik 16. And no, money, hoes, and clothes is not all that we know. I'm still joined by the legendary journalist, man of many hats, friend to me, friend to the show now, because he's been here officially, Anslem Samuel Rock. And just want to grab a couple questions. This is category two. We go over the rap performance on this album. We're talking about Ready to Die by the notorious B.I.G. We're going to jump right into it. Dimension one, personality and charisma. How much of that is Biggie able to showcase on this album?
Yeah, personality and charisma. I feel like both of those are there. You get split personalities. For one, like you get the morbid, want to rob, want to steal, or I have to rob and steal to kind of survive. The suicidal elements that's there. The charisma comes across more so in the Playboy, the Big Papa persona, of it. It's almost like a Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde kind of situation. Like that bravado comes across, and the charisma is there. And I mean, it goes back to our earlier conversation for being the self-professed, black and ugly as a however, but then to be that, own it, and then flip that where I'm a ladies' man. That's the definition of charisma. Where just like,
Yeah.
all right, I'm not attractive, I'm not fit, whatever the case is like that, but I can still bag your girl. Is it all the tracks? Because charisma, he's not doing charisma on every single track. That's a little bit different there. But
There's a street charisma he has, almost like a Coogee rap effect, where he makes it relatable to the people who understand that life, like everyday struggle. He starts by saying, I know how it feels to wake up, like there's there, and he injects humor even in the street stuff. So because to do that, it's a finessing, it's a balancing act. Give Me the Loot is supposed to be this dark song dealing with dark subject matter, and he finds ways to inject humor in there. I think that all adds to the charisma too. So it's the compelling factor that makes you want to keep listening, that a lot of street rappers don't have. I don't know if Pusha T has that
mhm.
to hold
Yeah,
your attention for a whole album.
yeah. I mean, but he has a personality, and I think even off the mic, his personality I think came across. So you get the humor. This one doesn't have the humor as in heavy doses the same way, but like you are drawn to Biggie as a person, as an MC, as a character. You're drawn to him, and it's that it quality, and then like even he has, even again the voices. He can have like a high pitched delivery, the more laid back. But then when you see actually interviews of him, he is more like laid back and almost seems like quiet, and it's just like, oh, but you're still drawn in, because it's just he's delivering out of this, like, in this quiet bubble. Then it's like, all right, I gotta perform, and like brings this out, and it's still like how is he able to do that, like that magic, magicness kind of like pulling out. So I think
So
Hmm?
what you giving it on a scale from 1 to 5?
um
How well he showcased it on audio, let alone,
yeah,
because we got to see more through video, but just the job of making you compelled on audio.
yeah, I think yeah, some of this kind of ties back into like the flow and the storytelling. But I still, it's not perfect. I think he perfects it more, and I'm gonna give him room to grow in the future. So I would give this like the four.
All right, dimension two, believability versus suspension of disbelief. How good of a job does Biggie do at making us believe what he's saying?
Now, I think Biggie's ability to make you believe what he was saying is like it's there. I think it's top notch because again, it goes to that storytelling ability
Mhm.
where even for me personally, I've always been like, wait, how did Biggie have time to do all of this street stuff? Before because he died super young. It was like what 24, I believe. So it's
Yeah.
always like, did he do all that? But it's a question that doesn't even really matter because the storytelling, what he's painting out is it's an entertainment, it's believable in that sense. I think his believability is there, and I'm no person to question what he did or didn't do, in life because those stories, and also as a storyteller, you draw from something to kind of tell those stories, for it to be impactful. You can't just say, oh, I took a tech and I put in. It's like, wait, that's not the bullet you put. Like someone's gonna pull your card on if something's like off. It's like
Right.
no full clip in this, or I don't know, so I can't even speak to it. But just like you can kind of, if you kind of pull those things out. But the way he put it together was super believable. From the street stories to the women's stories, just the ability to do both sides of the coin. Like Warning, I don't think that Warning happened in real life, but the fact to say he knew scenarios like that to kind of speak to it, like, all right,
Right.
someone's coming to your door, and it's like that energy of like, damn, like like when he emphasizes certain words, like you feel the emotion in it. Like, damn, people really trying to stick me for my paper. You know, it's just like whether it be that scenario, rest of the scenario is like part of what led to that, but he knew
Right.
that feeling of like, I'm just trying to feed my daughter. But yet
Yeah.
Caps is trying to like stick me for my paper and mess with me. So I gotta do what I gotta do to defend home, you know?
And he's mentioning real people, right? He's talking about Lil Fame from MOP, from Prospect, and you know, like he's looping it in as a very likely possibility. The more I listen to this album, I realize how much more believable the claims were on here, because he's telling you, like on Everyday Struggle, even though he's bragging about going down south and setting up shop, he's like, I'm counting tens of thousands, like tens of thousands. Most rappers are bragging about millions, right? And it's a lot more believable actually than what he winds up doing on Life After Death, because Life After Death, he starts talking about these grandiose scenarios.
The Frank White era.
Yeah, Frank White type.
Frank White.
Here he's just about small time hustling or robbing a train, like the intro, or Give Me the Loot, doing stick up. All these things, like you said, he's pulling from somewhere which is not, even if it was 1 year of his life, right? His mom kicked him out. Maybe this is what he had to do in that 1 year of his life. You realize, okay, he's not telling kingpin mafioso stories on this album.
Yeah.
And like you said about the women's songs, it is believable. It's like, okay, you do get these women, and maybe you do lead them because your heart got broken on. He also does that weird thing where he keeps talking about the sister, which he continues on Life After Death. And I know his baby mom's Jan said it's like an inside joke that they had because the sister walked in on them having sex, but he kind of mentions it more than once. I'm like, this might have really happened, y'all. All right, what are we giving the believability scale from 1 to 5?
No, I think this one's a 5. I think if you talk it through, like it's easily a 5.
Cool. We're running through them. Dimension 3, the delivery and use of voice. You've been talking about this all throughout. What stands out here with how Biggie is using his voice and projecting on this album?
Yeah, I mean, again, we definitely talked about it a lot. I think like the Big Papa era, the more polished, like the flow, because you can say something as spoken word, but then when you sing songly, kind of like, I don't want to say sing song, but you kind of connect the words, like it's just the added cadence to it, which adds personality to it, is there and like impacting, I think, a lot of different artists as well. So there is really a flow to it. He could easily have said it a different way. You can take his lyrics, and if you said them not ever hearing him say it, you would interpret it in vocal a different way, and I would interpret a different way if you didn't have the reference of him. So it's really that he made those words come to life in a different way that probably no one else could. It would still be poetry for the most part, but just like his cadence, just like what part of his legend, you know, is that. And I do think, you know, from, you know, hearing the 93 versions versus the 94 recordings, when he stopped like writing as much and doing it in the head, that's when you're kind of living in it a little bit more, and you can kind of like take different approaches to it. He may have like, you know, wrote it in his head one way, like, okay, but then get on the mic and it's like, oh, now I'm hearing a beat, and you've lived those words.
Yes. Using, like you said, if he would have projected with the 93 voice on half of the other songs, we would have got a different, we would have received it a different way. The emphasis he puts on certain words, that's a skill that you can't teach everybody. Like, I feel like most people can rap nowadays, but you can't tell them how to put inflection on things to make the listener enjoy it. Saying birthdays were the worst days, that's a choice. He didn't have to say that. Or, you know, just the calmness of Me and My B matches the somberness of that beat, and it matches the cinematic feel of it. You couldn't get big voice or, you know, shouting voice Biggie on that song. It wouldn't have felt the same.
Same thing,
Even Unbelievable, there's a calmness there. I'm live from Bedford-Stuyvesant. It is a hallmark of this album that you're getting half of it with that voice, the other half with the other, and he has natural pockets that he goes in and out of. Biggie never goes off beat, so his timing is impeccable. What are we giving delivery on the scale from 1 to 5?
No, it's a 5. You know, it's one of his greatest elements, you know, so yeah, it's a 5, no question.
All right, not to be mistaken with Dimension 4, the flow. Biggie's credit as being a flow master. He does multi-syllables. He does very spaced out slow rap like Big Papa, where it just kind of slinkies over the beat. Who they attract in with that line? What's your name? What's your sign? Like, there's a smoothness to what he wants to do. He does a lot of carryover bars. If the last syllable of a word spills over, any flows stick out to you from this album in particular?
Warning is such a flow. Like, again, in pocket. I think that was a '94 recording as well. But just like it starts, who the hell is this? Five. It's just like those flows are there, but it's like not every song.
He knows how to use the pauses. Like that's a choice, right? Who the hell is this paging me? If I crack, The Hangover. There you go. Morning, crack of dawn. Now I'm yawning. Like it's just it's a continuous kind of rollout. He does a lot of internal rhymes. So he has all those devices to flow that we praise, but like you said, it weren't perfected until the next album. Unbelievable is where he's probably showing the most fluidity and dexterity.
Yeah, his flow is remarkable.
Yeah.
Peace to Mateo.
What are you giving Flow on a scale from 1 to 5 heartbeats?
It's like on this album, it's like, it's that's the key part for this album. The thing is, when he does it so well, where it almost like overshadows it. But then as we've talked through this album, it's like, all right, I think I'll land comfortably at the 4.
Even on the what, when he does that little part where he's like, they get on my nerve like the hiccups and acting out the hiccups thing. Like those are flow choices. I think
the thing, because it's not consistent. I love that you mention these things that makes you want to switch back and go the other direction, but it's just like, I know there's a bunch of stuff on it where he doesn't display it, and that's the reason I'll stick at the 4.
All right, Dimension 5 is wordplay and bar intent. Biggie's really credited on being a lyricist, and I think a lot of that is more connected to things he did on Life After Death than what he did here. When I think about rhetorical devices that Biggie used on here, it's more imagery than anything else. There's simile, but his similes are pretty simple. Not a lot of metaphors.
Yeah.
Not a lot of entendres. It's not the form of Biggie that I think he gets idolized as being. Biggie's pretty straightforward on this album, and dare I say, he's pretty crass and abrasive in his attempt to be so blunt and direct. There's not a lot of things you have to rewind here.
Yeah, that's fair. Rewind. Like, what did he say? Yeah, that isn't really there. But I think that also can speak to the era. There was like this shock rap kind of era at the time. You think, the Flatliners came out either that year or like the year after. You had Gravediggers as well. Like you had this horrorcore like small bubble that kind of popped up. They tried to make it happen, but I don't think it really like took off. So yeah, I think there was that era of like, let me just say shocking shit, kind of thing. And it also goes back to what we talked about in the previous episode of like the two different time periods of creating the album. I do think that earlier stuff was more of a raw, unpolished artist, still trying to find his voice. But it was also interesting to me in those raw records where Biggie would do the two different voices. It's almost like his brain was creating narratives where he was having conversations and he didn't have a rhyme partner, so he wrote it himself. Like, all right, this is what it's going to be, and I'm going to write this out and write. He basically ghostwriting for himself.
Yeah.
In that sense, because like people, it's crazy to me when they realize it was Biggie again. I was like, no, that's Biggie's voice, just at a higher cadence.
Yep.
Biggie, let me get. Like it's him. I can tell it's him. And even on Warning, people was like, I thought it was Puffy, but that was the video. Like, it's clearly him. Yeah, so his storytelling and his idea of seeing these two different characters having their conversation or the overlap, he's visualizing things and putting it out, and he didn't have the partner for it, so he did it himself. There's a genius level to that as well.
I'm so glad you said that. Absolutely. And then everything you said prior, when I had OC on the show, we were talking about, oh snap, there was a legitimate class of 1994, and people forget about that era of Nas. Like if you hear Nas demo tapes, Nas is a part of that shockwave rap. This was the generation where that was kind of new to hip hop. Punchlines were fairly new to hip hop at the turn of the 80s. So this new shock rap came from the underground like show circuit, where you're saying stuff like, when I was 12, I went to hell for, you know, like Big L was a part of that class. Big L's whole career was shock rap. Let me say, and his first album came out this year too, or was about to come out, and he's saying all the hot button things you're not supposed to say. Any AIDS kind of lines, anything like that was like, you know, gas work. And so Biggie was going for that kind of stuff. Biggie goes into where he can be credited as being lyrical, I feel like, on tracks like Unbelievable. There's more of a mastery to how he to convey things and the word choices that he uses. I got 357 ways to simmer saute. That's clever. I think the 93 rhymes Biggie was right. He would have said, I got a 357, it'll cook you, right? He now came with a little bit more calm casualness. And then I think of what he did on the What, where he goes, excuse me, flows just grow through me. It's like trees to branches, cliff to avalanches. It's the praying mantis, deep like the mind of Farrakhan. Like, okay, you're getting a little bit more exercise with word choices and how you want to pull these instead of being so crass. And so there's moments to that, but I don't think that's what characterizes this album. This album is more about the shock lines or just how in your face I am with those lyrics. He's actually a little bit more clever on the girl songs or the songs about women. Let me stop calling them girl songs. But the songs about women. What would you give the wordplay and bar intent on this album on a scale from 1 to 5?
Vividly, he is painting those pictures like I mentioned already. You make a good point about the lyrical flipping kind of happening more so on later records. And again, you have to kind of, because his career was so short, it was in terms of the album's actual body of work is so limited in that sense. You kind of do meld everything together, and it has been 30 years. You kind of forget which came when. But yeah, to that end, I think if this was Life After Death, it would be a 5. But because this one he hadn't fully polished all of his like flows the same way, then I'd give this one like a solid 4, if not 4.5.
Got you. So yeah, there's one line I do not get. I never understood him spelling out his name and saying get it. Because he's like B-I-G-G-I-E, aka B-I-G, get it. I felt like the get it was unnecessary. Because he had already spelled Biggie out before he added the extra B-I-G. Anyway, I digress. Dimension 6 is the overall quotability of the album. The punchlines or poetic wisdom. The way I break this down is rappers usually fall into one or two of those classes. Big has punchlines on it. Again, I don't know how remembered they are or how effective they are over the span of time. For 94, they might have been impressive.
Yeah.
Fulfilling fantasies without that nigga Mr. Rocque. Like, okay. Yeah, even back then saying, you played out like Kwame and them polka dots, that might have been considered a punchline back then.
But to your point, like the hard hitting punchline, it was like a battle punchlines. There weren't like those like death blows. It was haha funny. Not even haha. That's probably like, I don't want to like diminish the impact and the tonality of this album. But yeah, and looking at it from a critical lens of like punchlines per se, there weren't that many in this one. I think definitely Big's humor will come across more so in his later work. We kind of got, you got Player Hater, you got different ways to kind of show his personality and like be humorous. Like even what he did on Brooklyn's Finest.
I know it's right. If Faith have twins, you probably have Tupac.
Get it? Like, that line like there is like, okay, that's a punchline that is like, you stop, like go back and like listen to it. Like, wait, what'd he say? Oh,
in lieu of direct punchlines, the humor's there on this album all throughout. Like on One More Chance, where he taps into what you would later see, like you said, on the later albums, but like deciding it in the first verse with she want that H-Town, she want that old thing back. Or on Friend of Mine, where he's like, oh, we playing Wu-Tang, METH, oh shit, look at her. Like he has those moments. Or the classic line that he gets a lot of criticism for from newer listeners, who are discovering this for the first time, where he uses the Richard Pryor line on Me and My Beat, right? She looks so good, I would,
Yeah.
right? You brought up a point about questionable lines all throughout this album. What do you have to say about those?
I mean, we touched on it already. Like, the main one, to kind of like when you first like, wait, what is this? Like, you look so good. It's like, I only recently got the context of like the Richard Pryor line. Like, it was just, I always was like, why the hell did Biggie say this? Like, why did no one like say like, hey, like, what, like, let's not put this out there. But listen to it again. I mean, and I know on the remastered version, Dreams is on there. And he disses Escape, talking about, he'd rather be with RuPaul kind of thing. Is like the fact, especially in that era, we're in a different era now, but the accessibility of like diversity of the spectrum of genders and all that wasn't really there at that time. So like to even have anything questionable was like, yo, like what's the rationale, the thought process like here? So there's definitely things where it's like what are you talking about? So there's questionable lyrics in that sense, where like it's almost like a bad punchline. Or like, is the potential at that time, scrutiny for this bar, worth it for the punchline? That's
I think what we were talking about when I was saying the difference between the shock value. I want the reaction now, as opposed to how does this sound in the larger context of the album, right? Again, that's what characterizes this album. He was going for the cheap, like I said, the quick reaction kind of thing. And sacrificing the quality of the punchline for the quick reaction. Like, give me the loot alone. When you say questionable, I thought you were talking more about, because there's another undercurrent of this album is violence towards women.
That is true too. Yeah,
I hate using the word misogyny because I feel like it gets misused a lot in circles, but here and maybe a lot of like the Dog Pound and Snoop albums, those are like really, really examples of misogyny. Like, I don't like, I don't respect or really like you. You only serve one purpose. Go package these bricks on Greyhound, and maybe I'll give you some rank. And if you don't do what I say, I'm gonna beat you. And tell me I'm the best in bed. Like, that's kind of the extent of the conversation with women. Big Papa tries to kind of go into smoother territory, but it's more like it still ends up with, go do fellatio while I smoke this blunt. Like, that's the kind of the
No, that's a great point. And me and my B is like a top, the pinnacle of that. Even though like he loved this girl, but it was like there was a line about like, you act up like a beat, you beat you right, so it's like
that's how he ends that first verse.
you're in a sense where with the hindsight of like listening to it with the 2024 maturity, it's like, wait, dude, you're talking about domestic violence. Like, this really shouldn't be a record or like be something that's promoted as a hit, but at the time, there was less guardrails in that sense. So definitely the way women were represented on this album, I think honestly there wasn't really anything positive in terms of the women. He loves his mom, yes, but he also would talk bad about her in different points in the album. He kind of had that struggle of how to talk about his mother or things they went through, how we're not there, we don't know how everything went down. And then to your point, the women were just sexual objects. They were more like props than anything. Even when he had this love song for a woman, he still throws in, oh, I'm gonna beat you. And it's like,
right.
So there definitely is that undertone of like the way women presented from a thematic standpoint, or just more as a prop. And maybe it kind of helps to breed his ego in the Big Papa persona. There's a lot to dissect. You could do a psychoanalysis of this album in a whole other podcast,
Absolutely. And just again, to the way that most of us receive this as casual listeners, we receive this as singles. Like, we're not hearing it. Most people aren't listening to bodies of album. I'm getting it. I'm listening to it from front to back, uninterrupted. I need that first hour to myself. You were doing that by assignment, like that was your job. And so us having to go revisit it, that's where it really spiked, that this is a repeated thing. And it didn't dawn on me how egregious Give Me the Loot was. Like, that whole song is mostly preying on women, down to the ad libs. And then there's so much so to the fact that they have to reverse certain words. Even on an explicit album, they still take out the word pregnant. It's going really far. Take for a coat. It's just really, or the guy is like, the other Biggie character is like, please let me jack her, please. So So yeah, when we
We're
talk
not
about
laughing. We're not laughing at that, but just like
yeah, no.
in terms of that. But like that's definitely a tone of the album that I forgot when I was like making like my notes for it. Yeah, that was like a theme in there as well, but that goes into like that dark territory for it, and it can be where I know we talked about this earlier in a different segment about like the the cringeworthiness of it over time, like those elements where you just like, you do make like a face for it, but in the mystique and legacy and impact of the record of Big, those elements, you may forget it for a second because like again, there are things, music can be subjective or is subjective across the board, and like there are definitely things where like in that moment of time where I was in my life, this was entertainment, but then you can look back at it, oh, that wasn't as good as I remember it, or whatever the case is like that, or like, oh, I never heard that lyric.
That's another thing that we do here, having to revisit this. Even when I was doing Plates and Crates, having to rehearse those lyrics, like, kind of broke my heart. I had to, as a man, I'm like, oh, these grown men took time to write some of these lyrics, right? Even Ghostface, it's like, oh, Ghost, you really talked about smacking and a lot. So, so yeah. You see he's using that, and that's why I say I feel like he came from a Robin Harris, Bernie Mac, where it's that abrasive comedy with that. Yeah, that's what it sounds like that Red Fox style. Like I'm going
more raunchy, and I think that's that raunchiness is where if you didn't balance it out with the glossiness, the album would have been more of an underground like gem in that sense, because again I think it's gonna keep coming back to that tonality of like the 93 recordings versus the 94 recordings. 93, you think about Give Me the Loot, which is just like it's literally a robbery happening on record. That's like in the Onyx pocket, and Onyx did blow up, but they had the slam kind of records, but like that's an underground hardcore kind of album, and I feel like Give Me the Loot is like that. It's just like, all right, we're just robbing people. And then there were lines in that. Give me the colorful swatches and, the mom, number one mom pendants. Like, there's stuff in there as well. But it's, when I think of punchlines, it is the wordplay, but then also like there's an element, where you get the ooh kind of thing. And I don't think on this album were many oohs. Like there wasn't like the, like, yo, I don't that from my definition of like what I'm looking for in a punchline,
Yeah, because it wasn't control on there. It was more about the impact right now, like kind of like show ready, right? If I'm at a show and I do Give Me the Loot, those lines where I'm like, had your mother singing it so hard, that's a punchline. The crowd's gonna react to that. They're gonna laugh. That song is fairly new. The H-Town line, that's fairly new. You're going for the cheap, low-hanging punchline fruit. These are not punchlines that make you rewind, as we established, right?
Yeah.
Now on the poetic wisdom side, there are moments where Big lets you know that there's more than what he's trying to sell you on the surface. Like he has these moments of insight, like on Things Unchanged, where he's like, if it wasn't for rap, I'd probably be knee deep in the game, because the streets is a short stop. Even you slinging crack rock, or you got a wicked drum shot. Or Respect is the song where in the third verse he's like, now it's 94, here's what I'm doing. If you're still in the streets, find another way, value your life, still pack a vest and a gat just while you're out there, but do better. So he has these moments. I don't know if Biggie drops any gems to live by besides that the streets is a short stop.
And it definitely comes on later albums, because you think about the 10 Crack Commandments, like that is like giving like, hey, he's giving instructions.
I mean, you could argue some albums give you enough of a gem on one song that you don't need it anywhere else. Same thing with content. I feel like doing Soul on Ice, right, by Razzcast, and that one song that's 7 minutes long, Nature of the Threat, is like, oh, you don't need him to rap about anything deep other than that. that fills that space. The rest of the rhymes could be all braggadocio. Juicy has a lot of those quotables. Like when I was dead broke, I couldn't picture this. We used to fuss when the landlord dissed us, wonder why Christmas missed us. So they're there, and then we all know how much this album has been quoted, namely by Jay-Z alone. Jay-Z alone is he's caught a lot of flack for how much he's quoted, even from random songs, right? On a friend of mine, that thug nigga till the end, tell a friend, biatch. Like, you gotta be That's a deep cut line. Like, he's really kept a lot of these Biggie lines alive. Uchi Wally, you know, when it comes to sex, I'm similar to the Thriller, right? Anyway, but overall quotability, good, bad, or ugly on a scale from 1 to 5. We talked about how much this album's been quoted, the lack of punchlines, limited poetic wisdom, but overall, because it's been quoted so much, good or bad, what would you give this 1 to 5?
So before I give an answer, because I get it, like they're different buckets. Like, you know, if you say quotability, like the album's been quoted 1 million times, like that's a 5. You mentioned the punchlines, we may give that a little bit lower.
It's probably tricky in this case because I think Biggie is one of those mutants too, where he's able to do both. He just didn't do either on a high level on this album.
Yeah, and for me, is like what comes to me first is the quotability, and it's like there are so many quotes from the album. Whether those quotes, you know, have the poetic wisdom or the punchline, that's where it like knocks it. So, but my first gut instinct is the quotability of it. It's like, you know, you walk around cleaning the house, you're gonna say a Brooklyn line from this album, or whatever, like, yo, the Brooklyn way. So the quotability, I think, is there. The other two, like, they don't hold as much weight. The lyrical wisdom for this particular album. So I'll meet it in the middle, and I'll give it a 4. I'll give it a 4 for this one.
Fair enough. Dimension 7, the concepts. Every classic rap album usually has a conceptual song and some kind of conceptual material, unless the album itself is a concept. We talked about this album kind of having elements of being a loose concept, but they didn't really glue it together as tightly as they could. But are there any concept songs on here?
Yeah, I mean, concepts, you know, definitely, you know, suicidal thoughts, you know, is like, that's like the concept of like committing suicide, and like, you know, it goes through Warning, you know, those are like the most narrative, some of the most narrative record. But Warning is such like this gem of a record. It's not your typical single, but it's just such a creative piece of art, where if Warning by itself was taken and put into like the Smithsonian, I could see that, because it's just like you took this feeling and put it into record. Hearing the beeper is so like, you know, 1990 is like, today's like, what's that noise? Why is that noise going in the background? But it's just like the beeper, and then, you know, it just goes through. But yeah, he does a good job of those narratives. You know, give me the loot. He's painting the picture of like, all right, you know, like almost taking it back from the intro. We're gonna rob a train. We're gonna, you know, he just painting the picture with his co-pilot, which is another version of himself.
Yeah,
you know, it's just like, is that even him talking to himself to kind of figure out, all right,
like Fight Club?
is it a Fight Club moment where he's just like, yo, and talking about what should we do? Like, was there ever a Code D with him, or was it really just him talking to himself?
That's a good question. Yeah,
so, I mean, a lot of layers, you know.
There are multiple concept songs on here, and as a rapper, I always think of this as, to me, it's a prerequisite for if we're talking about a classic rap album, not just a good rap album. Mm-hmm. This is what separates you. This is what makes you an artist and not just somebody who can rap. It's like you've taken the time to create a song that took a little extra thought. It's like when Lil Wayne did Dr. Carter, when Nas did I Gave You Power. It's like, okay, so Big doing Suicidal Thoughts, that's part of the innovation too. I forgot to mention that in the innovation dimension. It hadn't been done, at least not explicitly. We got Mind playing tricks, we got rappers talking about considering it, but it's such a taboo topic, and Big was going so hard for shock value that he went full in. I'm gonna unalive myself at the end of this album.
Yeah.
And tell you all the reasons why. And you've heard me state these reasons throughout the album. You've heard me mention my baby mama and a sister. You heard me mention my mother. You heard me mention my dad, the streets, people trying to get me, right? Now this is culminating all on one song. I'm sick of it.
And it ties back to the album title, you know, like where, like, because if you take off Suicidal Thoughts, you take off the title track, and you just have the songs that are left, and it's called Ready to Die, you don't really get that sentiment. I think Suicidal Thoughts is necessary to kind of connect the dot to the title. So it goes back to what we're saying, like where there are different themes that aren't completely all pulled together cohesively, but from title to end track, at least that's one straight line that it kind of like, it's the last thing you remember listening to the album. You pick the album up, the first thing you're seeing, Ready to Die. Then you start listening to the album, you're going through different moods. Oh, he's a player, he got street stuff. Oh, here's the title track. And then when you're done with it, oh snap, this dude just killed himself.
Yeah.
You know, like you saw the title of the movie and you saw the last scene and it's like, oh, that's why they called it this.
That's why it's called that.
Yeah. You know.
So on a scale from 1 to 5, what are you giving this album for concepts?
For concepts, I think it has flaws though. Like we literally just said it. Like, you know, it's not cohesive, but it's pretty strong. I would say 4.5 for it. If they had brought the intro together more cohesively and did it that way, then it would be more easily a 5. Gotcha. And you mentioned that connected dot from the title to the last track, but it's like it veers off and it's not as consistent, but it's still pretty solid and it's something that we think about and know this album for. So 4.5.
Okay, so to the content, we got external content and internal content. It's how much is Biggie talking about things outside of his inner monologue, and how much is he talking about autobiographical stuff. I don't know if Biggie goes anywhere on this album that's outside of him. He's not rapping about, things done changed. Things done changed might be the biggest statement song, even though he inserts himself in that. It is more of his song about how the 90s have changed the streets, how Brooklyn is now. Don't come here with those fisticuffs in the bucket. That's probably it. Everything else is him in the picture. Mm-hmm. His life, his story, his narrative, his vantage point. Even when it's rapping about women, like we said, it's his view on the women. It's not, I need to get to know you, like, you know, Hey Lover from LL is all about the woman. Yeah. And what he wants to do if he could get a chance with her. Biggie's like, what you gonna do when you get a chance with me? So yeah, Things Done Changed is probably the only song where he's talking about environmental or any topic that's outside of him. Do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, because also you think about it. Yes, I agree. But it's also like when you have an artist introducing themselves to the masses, you want them. You know, that's part of like what the need is. I need to know you if I'm going to invest in you for more of your career and future records, because that definitely will be a flaw if an artist, definitely as a critic coming in and you see an album and it's like, oh, makes great music, but I have no sense of who you are as an individual, would be
that's
like
Jadakiss. That was the threat to Jadakiss's career. I remember reading the magazines, they would always pull Jadakiss and Black Thought. They were like, we don't know you. We know you rap, we know you got slick lines, but you haven't given us any of you. Where Biggie's the opposite of that. Do you leave this album feeling like you got to learn about him and his life?
Yeah, I mean, I know he has a kid. I know his mom had issues. I know you're getting all these biographical or autobiographical elements that give you a sense of who Christopher Wallace is. You know, more so than you get with just an average like album.
With Big on here, it doesn't even take full songs for us to get slices of his life, right? Even on a braggadocio song like The What, he mentions his father, right? He took the back way out, and then on, I think it was Things Done Changed, my mama got, like, we learned his mother has breast cancer. Just like he just volunteers this information in the middle of a street song. Like, so even when it doesn't even have to be a song like Everyday Struggle, where he's telling you his drug dealing life, or Juicy, where he's telling you his transitional life. Even on the songs talking about women, he mentions this little thing with the sister and the baby mom. His daughter, like you said, she's turning 2 now, or she's using the potty now. Like, it's in there. So, all right, on a scale from 1 to 5 for the external stuff, what are you giving it? And for the internal, what are you giving it?
Yeah, for external, doesn't really do it that much. So, at the bare minimum, the 2. But then for the internal, it's just all him. So I guess that's more so closer to like the 5,
Got you. Final dimension 10, the storytelling. Anslem has been inching towards this the whole time. The storytelling. This dimension exists because an OG radio host, shout out to Kwame Fair, said that all classic rap albums should have a story. And if you can't tell a story, then what are you doing? So, what do we think about the storytelling on this album?
I mean, yeah, like the whole thing, like, like we just said, it is his story, like his his memories, his childhood, or even things he saw if he didn't experience them directly, and then his ability to put that story on record, convey it, which is a skill not everyone kind of has. Might talk to a kid like, "Oh, how's your day today?" Good. It takes a certain kind of skill set to say, "Hey, it was good because of this," and then to make that rhyme, and put it together and paint that picture where, like, even now, 30 years later, we're still talking about the pictures that he painted.
Yeah.
That's the marking of an artist. People think of art a lot of times and they think visual art or like that, but then this is visual art, because his depictions, the way he did them, it paints the pictures in your head. So
Word pictures. Yep.
it's
Absolutely.
it's a key part of who he is. And again, I go back to like Warning, like I'm interested, and we'll never know the answer, like what was the inspiration to write Warning, to like put that record, like, oh, I want to do a record, because if I'm talking it out to myself, like, oh, I got a concept, I got an idea. Let's say, people are trying to get me from, like you have to think about this almost like a movie plot. It was just like, oh, like that's what Warning kind of like is. But even me saying that, I would have to sense the excitement, like, hey, I got an idea. It's not like, oh, I want to just rap. I don't think he goes into Warning just saying, oh, who the hell is, even you saying, who the hell is this paging me at 5:46 in the morning, you've already gone into it like I'm telling a story. You start from a narrative standpoint, you set up a question where it's like, oh, someone's paging him. What are they reaching out to him for? You've already set the tone. You've started a concept, and you're drawing the listener in with a question.
Yeah.
I just started looking at The White Lotus on HBO. I hadn't really paid attention to it, but then like a coworker had mentioned it, and I'm not telling any spoilers for those that haven't seen it. But what I appreciate, I finished the first season. I was started looking at the second season. What I've seen from both seasons, the way it starts, they set up a question of like, wait, where does the dead body come from? Then the season starts 1 week earlier. So you're going into this 7 episode season knowing the ending partially, but now you're intrigued. I'm like, wait, I want to figure out how we get to that point. And I think that's what Warning kind of does. It sets up like a question. Someone's paging me at a very specific time. It's very early in the morning. You only calling that time for booty calls or like some kind of danger. So it's like, what's going on? So he set the tone in that first few seconds of the record. So that storytelling and painting of a picture, that's the epitome of that on this like album for sure. Like Warning is one of my favorite like tracks, for sure.
I can tell. There's this dichotomy of focused storytelling and unfocused storytelling all throughout the album, because damn near every song is in narrative format from the beginning. Remember back in the days when niggas had, like, descriptiveness and storytelling is Biggie's superpower. I know everybody thinks he does all these clever lines, and it's really humor in how he paints pictures. Like you said, Me and My B is a pretty cohesive story. It's Renee before Renee.
Yeah.
And then Give Me the Loot is a story, even though it's told in this conversation thing. They're telling you from start to finish what's happening. They're plotting, and it ends up with a shootout. Everything. And I talked about Respect, how Respect is the story of his life. I'm born 1970 something, then I'm an adolescent, and then the third verse he's like, y'all got to change your life around, y'all got to do something a little better. If you're still in the streets, just be safe. But damn, everything's a story. Even within one verse, right? One verse at a time is a story. A friend of mine, he's talking to the woman about why he cheated with his sister. Well, this is why, because she gets wetter than you. Like, juicy is a story. It's not cohesive. He's just telling you elements of his life, but by the time you get to the end, you understand that he came from, this one-room shack to this limousine with the chauffeur. Same way that he does on Sky's the Limit, right? That's not a point A to point Z story, but you start getting the picture of his childhood to his adult.
It's also just the emotional. Like you can tell a story in a linear standpoint, or you can tell a story emotionally, where like I connect and I feel something. Even I think that's where, like, I mentioned it earlier, like there's some hardcore like street rap that like I love. Have I lived that life? No, absolutely not. But I can feel the energy and emotion of those that have lived it or what they're expressing. It's like Mobb Deep, like the stuff they talk about. It's just like you've painted a very vivid picture where like I feel like I'm now a third person in the car with you guys doing this, you know. So you've transported me sonically into that space, and that's the greatness of a storyteller. Same thing with a book. If you're reading a book, it's just pages, you know, letters on a page, and you're making me realize and like, oh, I can't wait. Ooh, like it's there's a storytelling to it, because like again, in a musical standpoint, it's technically one dimension.
Yeah.
You're just hearing the audio of it, but if you're doing it well, you're bringing the visual to me through your words. Same thing with a book. It's visual in that I'm reading it with no pictures, but my mind is now filling in the blanks. So you've done enough to set it up. The canvas is there, and now it's like paint by numbers. Maybe a bad example, but just now you're just filling in the color with your own imagination, you know?
No, I couldn't have said it better, man. That's a mic drop moment there, spoken like a true master of words. What we giving this on a scale from 1 to 5 for storytelling?
With storytelling, nah, like this is one of Big's like strengths. I think, yeah, this is a 5.
Got you. And with that concludes the category 2 breakdown and analysis with the pro, Mr. Anslem Rocque, of the album, which is now 30 years old, the debut album by Biggie Smalls, aka the Notorious B.I.G., Ready to Die. Anslem, honor, pleasure, privilege to have you on the show. I know you're supposed to come back next year with Starine, and we'll do Mr. Smith, hopefully, God willing. Please let the people know what you got cooking up. If there's anything publicly, if you want to let them know where they can find you. I know you're not as much of a public figure as you used to be, but if there's anything that you would like to let people know that's on the horizon, or where they can find you.
Nah, I mean nothing like, you know, blasting out there. Like, you know, like I'm thinking about going back to school, I guess would be a term for it, but I want to like kind of sharpen my skills in writing in a different path. I'm thinking about taking like a screenwriting course. So
Nice.
when I got to work on the book, that's still something that's been in the back of my head, but I want to kind of get the battery back in the back and like do all those things there, you know. But yeah, again, like I mentioned, I'm more behind the scenes now, doing other things in the marketing space. But yeah, it's definitely, I'm here. Always find me on all platforms. I am a Rock, you know, ROCQUE. You know, it is what it is, you know.
There you go. Again, if you ever want to do any digging in the archives, go Google Naked with Socks, go Google The Avenue magazine, and go reread some of those classic Complex XXL articles. This man, I know there's other shows that have broken down Biggie, but I wanted to make sure I got you on for it, and thank you for doing this for this long. You give me a lot to edit.
Once we started going, you know, we'll get it rolling, you know. And you didn't get to see it. I actually had the "If Big Was Still Alive" like tee, you know, right here. So, you know, I had to wear it. It was tucked down below, but you know, it was play. It was a good time, man. It's a good time, man. So I appreciate you. Thanks for what you do for this, you know. So
yeah, much appreciated. Thank you for all. You know, I knew you were going to challenge me on a couple of those, and it went exactly what I thought. Since we repping shirts, don't forget to visit the Rap Ruler and cop that. I used to love her t-shirt.
Came out this year too. That Resurrection came out in '94 as well.
It did. On that note, y'all know what it is. Till next time, next album, F a Rap Critic. They talk about it while I live it. Word to meth.